Hello and welcome. Today we're diving into one of the most critical jobs a manager has, organizing. It's the invisible architecture that decides if a company soars or just stumbles. It's all about how work actually gets done.
I mean, think about the last group project you were a part of. Remember that feeling? That initial chaos where nobody's quite sure who's doing what or who's really in charge of the final outcome? It's a classic problem, whether you're in a college course or a corner office. So how do you fix it?
Well, the answer is right here. It's all about organizing. This is the toolkit a manager uses to take that tangled mess of people and tasks and turn it into a well-oiled machine. It's how you build the vehicle that's actually going to get you to your goal.
Okay, so let's get into it. What do we really mean when we say organize in a management setting? Let's nail down a clear definition.
All right, here's the formal definition. It's the rational coordination of activities to achieve a common purpose. The two keywords to really grab onto here are rational, meaning this is deliberate, it's designed, not an accident, and common purpose, which means getting everyone to pull in the same direction. So how does this actually work? Well, it follows a pretty logical flow. First, you've got to know where you're going. That's establishing your objectives. Then you come up with the plans to get there. Next, you figure out all the different activities needed and you group them together, like marketing, finance, and so on. Then, and this is super important, you delegate authority. You put someone in charge of each group and give them the power to make things happen. And finally, you have to tie all those groups together so they're working in sync.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. It turns out that every single company has two organizational structures operating at the same time. You've got the official one, on paper, and then you've got the one that lives in the break rooms and the casual conversations.
So on one side, you have the formal organization. This is the one managers design, the official org chart, the job descriptions, all the written rules. It's how things are supposed to work. But then, bubbling just beneath the surface, you've got the informal organization. This one just grows organically from how people interact. It's built on friendships, unwritten rules, and shared values. And it can be just as powerful, sometimes even more so. This example just nails it. A manager in a factory can set an official target for how many fans to produce. But if the informal group decides, hey, let's not work too hard and make everyone else look bad, that social pressure can completely crush the official rule. This leads us to a classic problem in designing any organization. Just how many people can one person effectively manage? We call this the span of control. So what's the right call? Should you have a narrow span, where you manage just a few people? Or a wide span, where you're responsible for many? As you're about to see, there's some pretty big trade-offs either way.
A narrow span is great for tight supervision and control, but the downsides are huge. You end up with tons of expensive layers of management. Bosses start to micromanage, and the people at the top get really disconnected from the people at the bottom. On the flip side, a wide span forces managers to delegate and empower their people. But the big danger there is that the manager gets totally overloaded and can, lose control.
Faced with this dilemma, some of the early management thinkers tried to find a magic number. Consultants like Lindahl and Erwick famously suggested that the perfect number of people for a top manager to have was 4. It was a nice, simple answer, but I think you know where this is going.
Yeah, because the modern view is pretty clear. There is no single perfect magic number. The right span of control really depends on the situation. So if there's no magic number, how does a manager figure this out? Well, it all comes down to analyzing the key factors of your specific situation to understand just how much time and attention your team is going to need. This table really breaks it all down. The logic is actually pretty simple. Anything that requires more of a manager's time is going to favor a narrow span. Anything that requires less time allows for a wider span. So, for example, if your team is highly trained and they're doing simple, repetitive work, you can probably manage a lot of them. But if the team is new, the work is super complex, and everything's changing all the time, you're going to need a narrow span to give them the support they need.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap of the big ideas. First, organizing is how you build the structure you need to achieve your goals. Second, remember that every company has both a formal, designed organization and an informal, social one. Third, that span of control thing, it's a huge trade-off between close supervision and empowering your team through delegation. And finally, the right choice always depends on the situation, the people, the task, and the environment.
And that brings us to a final question for you to think about. Imagine you're managing a team at a fast-moving tech startup. The environment is chaotic, which might make you think you need a narrow span for close control. But you've probably hired brilliant experts who need freedom to do their best work, which argues for a wide span. So, what would you choose? And how would you balance those competing needs? That's the real challenge of organizing.